The first shot came without warning. Olivia Rose clutched her ragged shawl tighter around her shoulders as the bullet splintered the wooden post just inches from her head. Dust danced in the pale moonlight as she ducked behind a water barrel, her heart hammering against her ribs like a frightened bird. This hadn't been the plan, not getting caught, not risking everything. But her children were starving, and desperation made even the most cautious woman reckless. Montana Territory, 1876. Fort Benton had once been a promise of something better for Olivia and her little family. Now it felt like just another place determined to break her. "Step out where I can see you," a man's voice commanded, deep and steady. Not angry, which somehow made it more frightening. "I won't miss a second time." Olivia closed her eyes briefly, picturing her 3 children huddled together in their small, rented room on the edge of town. Lily, 10 and 2, serious for her age. James, 7 and already trying to be the man his father never was. And little Emma, barely 4, who still asked when Papa was coming back, even though the influenza had taken him over a year ago. "Please," she said, rising slowly, hands visible. "I have nothing." The figure stepped forward, moonlight catching on the barrel of his pistol. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore a duster that flapped gently in the night breeze. The shadow of his hat obscured most of his face, but she could see enough to know he was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30 or so, with several days' worth of stubble darkening his jaw. "Nothing except whatever you were planning to take from my storehouse," he said evenly. Olivia swallowed hard, knowing there was little point in denying it. The burlap sack at her feet told its own story. "My children haven't eaten in 2 days," she said simply, not begging, just stating a fact. "I tried finding honest work." The man was silent for a long moment, then holstered his weapon with a fluid motion that spoke of long practice. "3 children?" he asked. Olivia nodded, surprise flickering across her features before she could mask it. "I've seen you in town," he explained, stepping closer. "The oldest girl has your hair. The boy looks like he's carrying the weight of the world, and there's a little one who hides behind your skirts." His boots crunched on the packed dirt as he moved into a shaft of moonlight. His face was weathered but not unkind, with lines at the corners of eyes that suggested both laughter and hardship. His hair, what she could see beneath his hat, was the color of wheat. "Yorke Jensen," he said, extending a calloused hand that she was too startled to take. "This is my ranch, and that's my food you were about to steal." Olivia stiffened her spine. "I would have paid it back somehow." Something that might have been amusement crossed his features. "Would you now? And how exactly would you manage that, Mrs. Rose? Olivia Rose?" She didn't correct him on the misses. It was easier sometimes, being a widow than being abandoned. "I can work. I'm not afraid of hard labor." Yorke Jensen studied her for a long moment, and Olivia felt acutely aware of her threadbare dress, her worn boots, the tangled mass of auburn hair that had escaped its pins. She knew what she must look like: desperate, wild, dangerous perhaps. "How old are your children?" he asked finally. 10, 7, and 4, she answered, confused by the question. He nodded as if confirming something to himself. "I have 2, 8 and 6, lost their mother to childbed fever 3 years back." Understanding dawned slowly as she watched him pick up the sack she dropped. But instead of emptying it, he walked to the storehouse door, unlocked it, and disappeared inside. When he emerged moments later, the sack was fuller than before. "There's salt pork, flour, beans, and some dried apples," he said, holding it out to her. "Should last a week if you're careful." Olivia stared at the bag, then at him, suspicion warring with desperate need. "Why?" "Because my children need someone like you," he said simply. "And from the sound of it, yours could use someone like me." She didn't take the bag. "I don't understand." I'm offering you a job, Mrs. Rose. My children need looking after, the house needs tending, and I could use help with the cooking and washing." He paused. "There's a cabin on my property, small but sound. Room for you and your three. In exchange for your work, you'll have that cabin, meals, and fair wages." "I'm not looking for charity," she said, even as her mind raced through the possibilities. "Good, because I'm not offering any. I'm offering honest work for honest pay." His mouth quirked into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Though I reckon we're starting off on an unusual footing, what with you trying to rob me and all." Despite everything, Olivia felt a surprised laugh escape her. Most job interviews don't begin with gunfire. Most potential employees don't try to steal the boss's supplies before they're hired, he countered, and this time there was a definite glint of humor in his eyes. Olivia reached for the sack, her fingers brushing his as she took it. "When do I start? Tomorrow? Noon. I'll send a wagon for your things." He stepped back, tipping his hat slightly. "You know where the Rocking J Ranch is, east of town, about 3 miles. That's the one." He started to turn away, then paused. "Mrs. Rose, next time you need something, just ask. I don't take kindly to thieves, but I've never turned away someone truly in need." She watched him mount his horse and disappear into the night, wondering if she'd imagined the entire encounter. But the heavy sack in her arms was real enough, and for the first time in months, Olivia felt something dangerously like hope unfurling in her chest. The walk back to town was long, and dawn was breaking by the time Olivia reached the small room above the laundry where they'd been living since arriving in Fort Benton. She climbed the rickety stairs quietly, not wanting to wake Mrs. Hawkins, the laundress who had given them the room in exchange for Olivia's help. Inside, her children slept exactly as she'd left them, Lily and Emma sharing the narrow bed, James curled on a pallet nearby. The room was cold. The fire she'd carefully banked before leaving had long since died. She set the sack down and knelt beside the stove, coaxing new flames from the embers. As warmth slowly returned to the room, she heard the rustle of blankets. "Mama," Lily's voice was thick with sleep. "Where did you go? It's not even morning yet." Olivia turned to find her oldest sitting up, dark auburn hair falling in tangles around her thin shoulders. So like her at that age, but with her father's solemn eyes. "I've brought breakfast," she said, gesturing to the sack. "And news." Lily's eyes widened at the sight of the bulging sack. Did someone give you all that?" Olivia hesitated, then nodded. She wouldn't lie to her children, but some truths could wait. "And I've found work. Real work with fair pay and a place for us to live." "A place of our own?" Lily asked, hope making her voice younger. "A cabin." "On a ranch outside of town." Olivia busied herself with preparing a simple breakfast, using just a little of their new bounty. The rancher needs help with his children and his house. By now, James was awake too, sitting up with his hair sticking out in all directions. "Are we going to be cowboys, Mama?" he asked, excitement evident despite his efforts to sound grown up. She smiled. "Not just yet, but there will be horses, I'm sure." Little Emma stirred last, blinking owlishly at the unusual morning activity. "I'm hungry," she announced, as though this were a new and interesting development. "I know, sweetheart, and look, we have food." They ate like they hadn't seen food in weeks, which wasn't far from the truth. Olivia watched them, memorizing the sight of their faces bright with satisfaction, knowing that moments like these were rare treasures. After breakfast, she told them more about the job and their coming move. Lily, always the practical one, immediately began organizing their few belongings. James peppered her with questions about the ranch, horses, and whether there might be Indians or outlaws nearby. Emma simply clutched her rag doll and asked if their new home would have a real door. "Yes," A real door, Olivia assured her, heart aching at such a simple wish. And windows, too. The morning passed in a flurry of preparation and anticipation. Mrs. Hawkins was genuinely happy for them, though Olivia suspected the laundress would miss the extra help more than their company. "A ranch, eh?" the older woman said, folding sheets with practiced efficiency. "Whose place?" "The Rocking J. Yorke Jensen's ranch." Mrs. Hawkins paused, giving Olivia a shrewd look. "Jensen, is it? Good man by all accounts. Lost his wife some years back. Keeps to himself mostly, but fair in his dealings." She returned to her folding. "Handsome, too, if you've a mind for such things." Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "I'm only going to work for him, Mrs. Hawkins." "Of course, dear." The older woman's tone suggested she wasn't convinced. "Just mind yourself. A widow with children and an unmarried rancher under the same roof. People will talk." "We'll be in a separate cabin," Olivia said firmly. "And I have no interest in remarrying. My children are my only concern." Mrs. Hawkins merely hummed in response, a noncommittal sound that somehow conveyed both doubt and amusement. True to his word, a wagon arrived at noon. The driver wasn't Yorke Jensen, but a weathered man who introduced himself as Dale. "Ranch foreman," he explained, helping load their meager possessions. "Boss said to fetch you and the little ones." The children were beside themselves with excitement, even Lily forgetting to be serious as they climbed aboard. Emma insisted on sitting next to Dale, peppering the taciturn man with questions that he answered with surprising patience. The journey to the Rocking J took less than an hour. As they crested a gentle rise, Olivia got her first proper look at what would be their new home. The main ranch house was larger than she'd expected, a solid two-story structure with a wide porch. Several outbuildings clustered nearby, and beyond them stretched fenced pastures where cattle grazed. A creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwoods that provided welcome shade. And there, set apart but not too distant from the main house, stood a small cabin. It was simple but solid, with a stone chimney and what appeared to be a small garden plot nearby. "That'll be your place," Dale said, following her gaze. "Been empty since the last hand moved on. Boss had the women from town come out and give it a good cleaning yesterday afternoon." Yorke Jensen himself was waiting for them in the yard, deep in conversation with a boy who looked to be around 8. Both turned at the sound of the wagon, and Olivia was struck again by the rancher's presence. In daylight, she could see that his hair was indeed the color of wheat, his eyes a clear blue that reminded her of Montana skies. The boy beside him was a miniature version, same coloring but with a sprinkling of freckles across his nose. "Mrs. Rose," Yorke said, stepping forward to help her down from the wagon. His hand was warm and strong around hers. "Welcome to the Rocking J, Mr. Jensen." She inclined her head slightly, suddenly aware of 5 children watching them with undisguised interest. "This is my son, Matthew," Yorke said, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "And somewhere around here is his sister, Sarah." As if summoned by her name, a small whirlwind in a blue dress darted from behind the house, skidding to a halt when she spotted the newcomers. The girl, who Olivia guessed to be 6, had her father's blonde hair done in 2 neat braids. "Are you our new mama?" Sarah asked bluntly, staring up at Olivia. A flush spread across Yorke's face. "Sarah, Mrs. Rose is going to help us with the house and cooking." "She's not," he broke off, clearly uncomfortable. Olivia knelt to the child's level. "I'm not going to be your mama, Sarah. No one could replace her, but I am going to help your father take care of you and your brother, and I've brought my children to live here too." She gestured to where Lily, James, and Emma were cautiously climbing down from the wagon. "Perhaps you could all be friends." Sarah considered this, blue eyes serious in her round face. Then she nodded once, decision made, and marched over to Emma, who was clutching her doll defensively. "I have dolls too," Sarah announced. "Want to see them?" Emma looked to her mother for permission, and at Olivia's nod she gave Sarah a shy smile. "Yes, please." The ice broken, the children began to intermingle, sizing each other up with the direct curiosity of the young. Matthew approached James with the careful dignity of an older boy, while Lily hovered protectively near her siblings. "They'll sort themselves out," Yorke said, watching the children with a fond expression. "Young ones usually do." He turned back to Olivia. "I'll show you the cabin first, so you can get settled. Then we can discuss your duties." The cabin exceeded Olivia's expectations. Though small, it was clean and sturdy, with 2 rooms, a main living area with a stone fireplace and cooking area, and a smaller bedroom. There was actual furniture, simple but well made. A table with chairs, a rocking chair by the fire, shelves for storage, and in the bedroom, a large bed and a smaller trundle that could be pulled out. "It's not much," Yorke said, watching her take it all in. "But it's weather-tight and the chimney draws well." "It's perfect," Olivia said honestly. After the crowded room above the laundry, this felt like a palace. "Thank you." He looked pleased at her reaction. "There's a vegetable garden out back. Previous tenant started it. You're welcome to tend it and keep whatever grows. The well is shared with the main house, good, sweet water." While Dale helped bring in their belongings, Yorke outlined what he expected of her. She would cook and clean for the main house, do laundry, mend clothing, and generally look after his children when they weren't in school. "During roundup or when I need to be away, I'd ask that you stay in the main house overnight," he added. "I don't like leaving the children alone." The wages he offered were more than fair enough that she could save a little each month if she was careful. Meals for her family would come from the ranch's stores, and the cabin was theirs for as long as she worked there. "Any questions?" he asked when he'd finished. 1,000, but Olivia settled on the most practical. "When would you like me to start?" "Tomorrow morning is soon enough. 6 o'clock breakfast at the main house for me and the hands. The children usually eat around 7. He hesitated, then added, "I've had Mrs. Thornton from town looking after things these past few weeks, but she's eager to get back to her own family. She'll show you the routines tomorrow." That night, after a simple supper in their new home, Olivia tucked her children into their new sleeping arrangements. Lily and Emma would share the trundle bed, while James had a pallet near the fireplace in the main room. They were all too excited to sleep easily, full of chatter about the ranch, the animals they'd glimpsed, and the Jensen children. "Matthew says there are wolves sometimes," James reported, eyes wide with thrilled terror. "And last year a bear came right into the yard." "Sarah has 4 dolls," Emma countered, clearly finding this far more impressive than wildlife. "And a real tea set." Lily, as usual, had been observing more practical matters. "Their house is nice, Mama, bigger than any we've lived in, and Mr. Jensen seems—" She searched for the word fair. "Yes," Olivia agreed, smoothing her daughter's hair. "I think he is." Later, with the children finally asleep, Olivia sat by the fire in the rocking chair, allowing herself a rare moment of reflection. 28 years old, twice widowed, though only once by death, with 3 children to raise alone. This wasn't the life she had imagined when she'd left her parents' home in Pennsylvania a decade ago, full of romantic notions about the West. The reality had been harder, crueler in many ways. Her first husband, James's father, had died in a mining accident when she was barely 20. Her second, she pushed thoughts of Richard firmly away. Some ghosts were best left undisturbed, and now here she was, working for a man who had caught her attempting to steal from him. A man who, instead of turning her in, had offered her a chance. A man whose children were already worming their way into her heart after just one day. "This is business," she whispered to the fire. "Nothing more." But as she finally sought her own bed, Olivia couldn't quite dismiss the memory of Yorke Jensen's clear blue eyes or the gentle way he'd spoken to his children. Dawn came early to the rocking J. Olivia was up before first light, wanting to be prepared for her first day. She dressed carefully in her best though still shabby dress, pinned her hair neatly, and roused the children. "Can't I stay here?" Lily asked, reluctant to leave their new home. "I could watch Emma." "Not today," Olivia said firmly. "I need to learn my duties, and I want all of you where I can see you." She softened her tone. "Besides, I'm sure Sarah would like to show Emma more of her toys, and Matthew mentioned something about fish in the creek to James." The walk to the main house took less than 5 minutes. Smoke was already rising from the chimney, and lamplight glowed in the windows against the pre-dawn gray. Olivia took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and knocked on the back door. It opened almost immediately to reveal a plump, pleasant-faced woman in her 50s. "You must be Mrs. Rose," the woman said with a warm smile. "I'm Esther Thornton. Come in, you're right on time. Mr. Jensen is particular about his breakfast being prompt." The kitchen was large and well-equipped, with a massive cast-iron stove that radiated heat, ample workspace, and a long table where, Mrs. Thornton explained, the ranch hands ate their meals. "6 men in all, including Mr. Jensen and Dale," she said, efficiently directing Olivia in the preparation of a hearty breakfast. "During roundup or branding, there'll be more, of course, but that's not for a few months yet." The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Breakfast for the men, then for the children. A tour of the house, with instructions on Mr. Jensen's preferences and routines. The children were set to play in the front yard under Lily's watchful eye, while Olivia learned which linens needed changing, how the laundry was managed, what foods were kept in the root cellar. Mrs. Thornton was kind but forthright. "It's a big job for one woman," she admitted. "Especially with your own little ones to mind. But Mr. Jensen's fair and he won't expect miracles, just honest work." By midday, Olivia's head was swimming with information, but she felt reasonably confident that she could manage. Mrs. Thornton departed after lunch, leaving Olivia in charge of the household. The afternoon passed without incident. She prepared a simple but hearty supper, managed to keep all 5 children from serious mischief, and had the house in reasonable order by the time Yorke and his men returned from their day's work. "Something smells good," Yorke said as he entered, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. He looked tired but satisfied, the healthy exhaustion of physical labor well done. "How was your first day, Mrs. Rose?" "Busy," she admitted with a small smile. "But Mrs. Thornton was very helpful," he nodded, washing his hands at the kitchen pump. "She's a good woman. Saved my sanity these past weeks." He glanced over to where all 5 children were engaged in some elaborate game involving the dining room chairs. "And how are the young ones getting along?" "Like they've known each other forever," Olivia said, following his gaze. "Your Sarah has quite taken Emma under her wing." A shadow crossed his face at the mention of his daughter. "She misses her mother," he said quietly. "It's been hardest on her, I think. Matthew was young enough that he's adjusted, but Sarah—" He shook his head. "Well, perhaps having your girls around will help." The moment felt suddenly intimate, and Olivia busied herself with the stove. "Supper will be ready soon. Should I call the hands?" The pattern of their days was quickly established. Olivia rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, sent the older children off to school with Yorke when he drove into town for supplies, a weekly occurrence, and spent her days managing the household, looking after Emma and Sarah, and tending to the endless tasks that kept the ranch running smoothly. The work was hard but satisfying. For the first time in years, Olivia felt purposeful, needed in a way that went beyond the desperate scramble for survival. The children thrived in the open air and regular routine. Even Lily, always so serious, began to laugh more freely as the weeks passed. And then there was Yorke. Olivia told herself firmly that her awareness of him was nothing more than natural gratitude and respect for her employer. If her pulse quickened when he entered a room, if she found herself lingering over his mending or preparing special dishes she knew he enjoyed well, that was simply her being thorough in her duties. Yet she couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her when he complimented her cooking, or the way her eyes sought him out when he worked in the yard with Matthew, patiently teaching his son the skills he would need. She noticed how he always had time for Sarah's endless stories, how he never raised his voice to the children, how his laughter, rare but genuine, transformed his face. For his part, Yorke maintained a careful distance. He was unfailingly polite, even kind, but never stepped over the line of propriety. If his gaze sometimes lingered on her when she wasn't looking, if he found reasons to be in the house more often than strictly necessary, these were things Olivia pretended not to notice, even as they sent tendrils of something dangerously like hope curling through her chest. The change came gradually, then all at once, like the Montana spring that was beginning to soften the land around them. It began with a letter. Olivia was dusting the shelf in Yorke's small office when she noticed it, sealed and addressed to someone named Thomas Jensen in Bozeman. "My brother," Yorke said from the doorway, startling her. "I write to him every month, though he rarely answers." Olivia set down her duster, embarrassed to be caught looking at his personal correspondence. "I didn't mean to pry." "You weren't," he assured her, stepping into the room. "Thomas is my older brother. He has a law practice in Bozeman. We don't see eye to eye on many things." She recognized the carefully neutral tone people used when discussing difficult family. "I haven't spoken to my parents in almost 7 years, she offered, surprising herself with the admission. Yorke raised an eyebrow, inviting her to continue if she wished. "They didn't approve of my first husband," she explained, moving the duster along the shelf. "He was a miner with big dreams but little money when he died, and I remarried so quickly." She shook her head. "They wrote me off entirely." "And your second husband?" Yorke asked quietly. "Emma's father, I presume." Olivia stiffened slightly. "Richard Rose. He left us just after Emma was born. Went to California for the timber boom, promised to send for us." Her laugh held no humor. "We received exactly 2 letters and 1 money order, then nothing." "I'm sorry," Yorke said, and she could tell he meant it. "Don't be. It was for the best, truly." She hesitated, then added, "He wasn't a kind man, especially when he drank, and he drank often." Something flashed in Yorke's eyes, anger perhaps, though not directed at her. "No man worthy of the name raises a hand to his family," he said, his voice low and fierce. The moment stretched between them, fraught with unspoken understanding. Then Yorke cleared his throat and changed the subject, asking about the supplies they needed from town. But something had shifted, a barrier lowered if not completely removed. That evening, instead of retiring to his room after supper, as was his custom, Yorke lingered at the table while Olivia cleared away the dishes. The children were playing outside in the last of the daylight, their laughter drifting in through the open windows. "I never thanked you properly," he said suddenly. Olivia paused, dishcloth in hand. "For what?" "For bringing life back into this house." He gestured around the kitchen. "Before you came, we were just existing, getting through each day. The children ate and slept and went to school, but there was no joy in it, no heart." He looked directly at her. You've changed that, Olivia. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent a tremor through her. I should be thanking you, she said, returning to her work to hide her confusion. You gave us a home when we had nothing. Is that what this is to you? Just a place to stay? He stood, moving to lean against the counter near where she worked. Close, but not too close. Of course not, she said, looking up at him. It's become. Words failed her. Home, he suggested softly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Yorke reached out slowly, as if giving her time to pull away, and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered just a moment longer than necessary. Good, he said simply. Then he was gone, stepping out onto the porch to call the children in for their baths, leaving Olivia with a wildly beating heart and a dishcloth twisted between her fingers. The following weeks brought a subtle but undeniable change in their interactions. Small touches his hand briefly at the small of her back as he passed behind her, her fingers brushing his when she handed him coffee. Conversations that lingered well after the children were abed, ranging from books they'd read to dreams they'd harbored. Smiles that held meaning beyond mere politeness. And the watching, oh, the watching. Olivia became acutely aware of Yorke's gaze, the way his eyes followed her as she moved about the house or yard. Not predatory, never that, but appreciative. Wondering. She found herself responding in kind, stealing glances when he worked with the horses, admiring the clean lines of his profile, the strength in his shoulders. The children noticed, of course. Children always do. Are you going to marry my papa? Sarah asked one afternoon as Olivia helped her fashion a new dress for her doll. The question was delivered with the matter-of-fact curiosity of a 6-year-old, but it still made Olivia's cheeks flame. Sarah, that's not a proper question to ask, she chided gently. Why not? Martha Peterson's papa got a new mama last year after her real mama died, and papa looks at you the way Mr. Peterson looked at Martha's new mama. Sarah pushed the needle clumsily through the scrap of fabric. And you like papa too, I can tell. It's complicated, sweetheart, Olivia said, helping the girl knot her thread. Grown-ups always say that when they don't want to answer, Sarah grumbled, but let the subject drop. Lily was more direct. That night, as Olivia brushed out her daughter's hair before bed, the 10-year-old fixed her with a serious look in the small mirror they shared. You love Mr. Jensen, Mama, Olivia's hand stilled. Lily. It's all right if you do, her daughter continued earnestly. He's kind, and he takes good care of us. Not like. She trailed off, but Olivia knew she was thinking of Richard. Mr. Jensen is a good man, Olivia agreed carefully, and I respect him very much. Lily rolled her eyes with the burgeoning attitude of approaching adolescence. That's not what I asked. Olivia resumed brushing, using the rhythmic motion to gather her thoughts. Love is a serious matter, especially when there are children involved. If there were ever to be anything between Mr. Jensen and myself, it would affect all of us, not just me. You, James, Emma, Matthew, and Sarah too. We all get along well enough, Lily pointed out. Yes, but being friends is different from being family. Olivia set down the brush. What brought this on, Lily? Her daughter twisted on the stool to face her. James had a nightmare last night. About Richard coming back. Olivia's heart clenched. Oh, sweetheart, why didn't you wake me? I handled it, Lily said with quiet pride. But he was scared. He asked if we would have to leave here if Richard found us. She took a deep breath. I told him no because Mr. Jensen would protect us, and he said that would only happen if Mr. Jensen was our papa too. The simplicity of a child's logic, Olivia thought, even as her chest tightened with both hope and fear. Lily, listen to me. We are safe here. Mr. Jensen has given us a home and work, and he would never turn us out regardless of anything else. But it would be better if he loved you, Lily insisted. Then we could be a real family again. Olivia pulled her daughter into a fierce embrace, blinking back unexpected tears. We are a real family just as we are. You, me, James, and Emma. That won't ever change. But that night, lying awake in her bed, Olivia allowed herself to imagine a different sort of family, one that included Yorke Jensen and his children. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. The turning point came with the spring storm. April in Montana was capricious, warm, sunny days giving way without warning to vicious weather. This storm blew in from the north, bringing driving rain that quickly turned to sleet, then snow as temperatures plummeted. Yorke and the hands were out checking the new calves, making sure they and their mothers were protected from the worst of the weather. The older children were still at school in town, though Yorke had promised to collect them on his way back. Olivia was alone in the main house with Emma and Sarah, keeping the fire built high against the growing cold, when she heard pounding at the door. It was Dale, snow crusting his beard and hat. "Need help, Mrs. Rose," he said without preamble. "Got a mare down in the south pasture about to foal. Boss sent me for supplies and another pair of hands." "The children," Olivia began. "Jacob's gone to town to fetch them and the others," Dale assured her. "But we need help with that mare now or we'll lose her in the foal." Olivia hesitated only a moment. "Let me get the girls settled." She quickly explained to Sarah and Emma that they would need to stay in the house alone for a little while. At 5 and almost 7, they were old enough to understand the seriousness of the situation, and they solemnly promised to stay by the fire and not touch the stove. After bundling up in her warmest clothes and grabbing the medical supplies Dale requested, Olivia followed him out into the storm. The wind cut through her layers like a knife, and within minutes, she could barely feel her fingers despite her gloves. The south pasture was nearly a mile from the house, and by the time they reached it, Olivia was thoroughly chilled. A crude shelter had been constructed for the mare, canvas stretched between poles, and beneath it, Yorke knelt beside the laboring animal, his face etched with concern. He looked up in surprise when Olivia ducked under the canvas. "Mrs. Rose, I sent for supplies, not I'm the supplies," she said briskly, kneeling beside him and opening the bag she'd brought. "And another pair of hands as requested. What do you need?" For a moment he looked like he might argue. Then the mare let out a distressed sound and his attention snapped back to the animal. "She's having trouble," he explained, stroking the horse's neck soothingly. "Foal's positioned wrong. I need to turn it, but I can't hold her steady and do it at the same time." Olivia had helped birth countless animals in her years on various farms and homesteads. "Tell me what to do," she said, already rolling up her sleeves. For the next hour they worked together in near-perfect coordination. Yorke gently manipulated the foal while Olivia kept the mare as calm and steady as possible, murmuring reassurances in the frightened animal's ear. Dale held a lantern, providing what light he could in the growing darkness of the storm. When the foal finally emerged, a spindly-legged colt with a white blaze on his forehead, all three humans let out a collective breath of relief. "He's beautiful," Olivia said, watching as the mare began to clean her newborn. Yorke sat back on his heels, exhaustion and satisfaction mingling on his face. "Thanks to you." He reached out to squeeze her hand, his gloves long since discarded. "I didn't expect. Most women wouldn't." "I'm not most women," she said simply. Something changed in his expression, then a decision made, a threshold crossed. "No," he agreed softly. "You most certainly are not, Olivia Rose." The moment was broken by Dale clearing his throat. "Storm's getting worse, boss. We should head back soon as the mare and foal are stable." By the time they had ensured the new mother and baby were comfortable and protected from the elements, The storm had indeed worsened. Snow was falling heavily now, driven almost sideways by the fierce wind, and darkness had fallen completely. "We'll need to rope together," Yorke shouted over the wind as they prepared to leave the shelter. "Easy to get lost in this, even on our own land." He tied a length of rope around each of their waists, connecting them like mountaineers. "I'll lead, Dale in the middle, Mrs. Rose at the end. Keep the rope taut between us." The journey back was harrowing. The wind seemed determined to push them off course, and the snow made it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Olivia's face burned with cold, and her legs felt increasingly leaden as they pushed through deepening drifts. They had been walking for what seemed like hours, though it couldn't have been more than 30 minutes, when Olivia's foot caught on something hidden beneath the snow. She pitched forward with a cry, twisting her ankle painfully as she fell. The rope around her waist went taut, preventing her from falling completely, but the damage was done. When she tried to stand, her ankle gave way beneath her. "I can't walk," she called out, her voice almost lost in the howling wind. Yorke was beside her in moments, his face a pale blur in the swirling snow. "How bad?" "Bad enough," she admitted, gritting her teeth against the pain. "Twisted, maybe worse." Without hesitation, Yorke scooped her into his arms. "Dale, take the lead. Follow the fence line, it should take us straight to the house." Olivia wanted to protest that she was too heavy, that he couldn't carry her all that way in such conditions. But the determined set of Yorke's jaw told her it would be useless. Instead, she wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face against his chest, trying to shield herself from the worst of the wind. Despite the circumstances, there was an undeniable intimacy in being held so close. She could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, the strength in the arms that cradled her against the storm. It seemed an eternity before the welcome glow of the ranch house windows appeared through the curtain of snow. As they stumbled onto the porch, the door flew open to reveal Lily, her face tight with worry. "Mama," she cried, then quickly stepped aside to let them enter. The warmth of the house was almost painful after the bitter cold outside. Yorke carried Olivia directly to the chair nearest the fire, setting her down with gentle care. "The children?" Olivia asked immediately, looking around. "All safe," Lily assured her. "Jacob brought us home before the worst hit. We've been keeping the fire going and watching for you." Indeed, all 5 children were huddled in the main room, their faces showing varying degrees of concern and relief. Matthew was doing his best to look grown up and unworried, while James clutched Emma's hand protectively. Sarah launched herself at her father the moment he set Olivia down. "Papa, we were so scared." Emma cried, "But I told her you'd come back because you always do, and I'm here now, little one," Yorke soothed, holding his daughter close. "Everything's all right." Dale had already retreated to the kitchen, where sounds suggested he was making coffee. Jacob and the other hands who had made it back were presumably in the bunkhouse, waiting out the storm. "Let me see that ankle," Yorke said, turning back to Olivia after ensuring Sarah was calmed. Despite her protests that she could tend to it herself, he knelt beside her chair and gently removed her boot and sodden stocking. Her ankle was already swelling, the skin purpling with bruises. His fingers were surprisingly gentle as they probed the injury. "Not broken, I think, but a bad sprain. You won't be walking on it for several days." "But the house, the children," Olivia began to protest. "Will manage just fine," he interrupted firmly. "Lily's quite capable, and I'm not entirely helpless around a kitchen." His mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Though I can't promise the bread will be edible." The domesticity of the scene, Yorke kneeling at her feet, the children gathered round, the storm howling outside while they remained safe and warm within, struck Olivia with sudden, breathtaking clarity. This was what she wanted. Not just safety or security, but this. A family, whole and together. And at its center, this man who had carried her through a blizzard without complaint. "Thank you," she said softly, meaning far more than just his care of her ankle. Something in her voice must have conveyed her deeper meaning, for Yorke's eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Always," he replied simply. The storm raged for 2 more days, effectively trapping everyone on the ranch. With Olivia confined to a chair or bed, the household routine adapted. Lily took over much of the cooking, with Yorke handling the heavier tasks. The younger children were assigned simple chores, which they approached with the enthusiasm of a game. On the afternoon of the second day, Olivia sat in the chair by the fire, her injured leg propped on a stool, watching as Sarah and Emma played with dolls on the rug nearby. James and Matthew had been enlisted by Yorke to help check on the animals in the barn, a responsibility that had them bursting with pride. Lily entered from the kitchen, carrying a cup of tea. "Here, Mama, I added honey the way you like." "Thank you, sweetheart," Olivia said, accepting the cup. "You've been such a help these past days." Lily shrugged, though she looked pleased at the praise. "It's not so hard doing what you do every day." "No," Olivia agreed with a smile, "just endless." Her daughter perched on the arm of her chair. "Mr. Jensen says your ankle is healing well. Another few days and you'll be up and about." "Poor man will be glad to have his house back in order," Olivia said with a small laugh. Lily gave her a sidelong glance. "I don't think he minds, actually. He seems happier, even with all the extra work." Before Olivia could form a response to this observation, the front door opened, admitting a gust of cold air and 3 snow-covered males. Yorke stomped his boots on the mat while the boys immediately began talking over each other, eager to report on their adventures in the barn. "And the new foal can already stand up," James was saying excitedly. "Papa says I can help train him when he's older," Matthew added, not to be outdone. "Only if you finish your schooling first," Yorke reminded him, hanging up his coat. His eyes sought Olivia's across the room, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "How's our patient?" "Restless," she admitted, "and feeling quite useless." He crossed to stand before her, tall and solid, bringing with him the scent of cold air and pine. "Never that," he said quietly so that only she could hear. Then louder, "Boys, go wash up. Lily, is supper nearly ready?" As the children scattered to their tasks, Yorke pulled a chair close to Olivia's. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low and serious. "A dangerous pastime," she teased, trying to ignore the quickening of her pulse. He acknowledged the jest with a slight quirk of his lips, then continued. "About the future, this arrangement we have." Olivia's heart sank. Was he going to suggest it wasn't working? That once she was healed, perhaps they should reconsider her position. "I know my ankle has caused difficulties," she began, "but I assure you once it's healed." "Olivia," he interrupted gently. "That's not what I mean at all." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of nervousness. "The fact is, I don't want you as my housekeeper anymore." The words hit her like a physical blow. "I see," she said stiffly, looking down at her tea, now grown cold. "Of course, we'll make arrangements to leave as soon as—" "No." He reached for her hand, clasping it firmly in his own. "That's not. I'm making a mess of this." He took a deep breath. "What I'm trying to say badly is that I want you here, but not as my employee. I want you here as my wife." Olivia stared at him, certain she had misheard. "Your wife?" Yorke's eyes, those clear blue eyes that reminded her of Montana skies, held her steadily. "Yes, my wife. Mother to all our children, yours and mine together, partner in everything." His grip on her hand tightened. "I love you, Olivia Rose." I think I began to fall in love with you that night I caught you trying to steal food for your children. Certainly, by the time I saw you facing down a blizzard to help birth a foal, there was no question in my mind. Olivia felt tears welling in her eyes, too overwhelmed to speak. I know it hasn't been long, Yorke continued, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke. And I know you've had reason to distrust men given your experience. I wouldn't rush you. We could have a long engagement if that's what you need. And if I say no, she managed finally, needing to know all possibilities, then you and your children still have a home here for as long as you want it, he said without hesitation. Nothing would change in that regard. I'm offering you a choice, Olivia, not an ultimatum. The tears spilled over then, tracking silently down her cheeks. Yorke Jensen, she said, her voice trembling but clear, I would be honored to be your wife, not because my children need a father, though they do. Not because I need security, though I'm grateful for it, but because I love you too, your kindness, your strength, your heart. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. Without regard for propriety or her injured ankle, he pulled her into his arms, cradling her against his chest as he had during the storm, but this time it was joy rather than danger that necessitated the embrace. "Mama," Lily's voice came from the kitchen doorway. She stood there with a wooden spoon in hand, her expression a mixture of concern and hope. "Is everything all right?" Olivia looked up at Yorke, then back to her daughter. "Everything is wonderful, Lily. Mr. Jensen," she caught herself. "Yorke has asked me to marry him, and I've said yes." There was a moment of stunned silence, broken by Sarah's delighted squeal. "I knew it. I told you, Emma." The next minutes were a chaos of children's reactions, Lily's quiet joy, Matthew's pleased nod of approval, James's excited questions about whether this meant he could finally learn to ride a real horse, and the younger girls' immediate discussion of what they would wear to the wedding. Later that evening, with the children finally asleep, the storm and excitement having exhausted them all, Olivia and Yorke sat together before the dying fire. Her injured leg was stretched across his lap, his fingers absently tracing patterns just above her bandaged ankle. "I never thought I'd find this again," she admitted softly. "After Richard left, I convinced myself it was better to be alone, safer." "And now?" Yorke asked, his hand stilling. She smiled, reaching out to touch his face. "Now I'm grateful every day that you caught me stealing your food." He turned his head to press a kiss to her palm. "So am I, though I suspect I would have fallen in love with you regardless of how we met." "Is that so?" she teased, her heart light with happiness. "What if I'd been the new school teacher, or a wealthy widow from back east?" "School teacher, widow, or thief, it wouldn't have mattered," he said with conviction. "Some things are simply meant to be, Olivia." As he leaned forward to kiss her properly for the first time, a gentle, reverent kiss that held both promise and restraint, Olivia knew he was right. This was meant to be, all of it. The difficult journey that had led her to Fort Benton, the desperate act that had brought her to his door, even the injury that had revealed the depth of their connection. Their wedding took place 6 weeks later, on a perfect June day that seemed designed specifically for the occasion. The ceremony was held on the ranch, with a justice of the peace from Fort Benton officiating. Most of the town turned out for the celebration, curious to see the woman who had captured the reserved Yorke Jensen's heart. Lily, Sarah, and Emma wore matching dresses of pale blue, while Matthew and James stood proudly beside Yorke, doing their best to look solemn and grown up. When Olivia spoke her vows in a clear, steady voice, there wasn't a dry eye among the women present, nor, truth be told, among some of the men. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the justice declared, and Yorke's kiss held none of the restraint of their first, drawing good-natured cheers from the assembled guests. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing under lantern light. As twilight deepened into night, Olivia found herself momentarily alone, watching the scene from the porch steps. Yorke was dancing with Sarah, the little girl standing on his boots as he moved carefully to the fiddle's tune. Lily was deep in conversation with Mrs. Thornton, likely about some domestic matter. The boys were engaged in what appeared to be a contest to see who could eat the most pie, while Emma dozed in Dale's lap, the gruff foreman looking surprisingly comfortable with his small charge. "Happy, Mrs. Jensen?" Yorke asked, appearing silently beside her. He had deposited Sarah with one of the town ladies and now held out his hand in invitation. Olivia placed her palm in his, allowing him to draw her away from the celebration, around the corner of the house where they could still hear the music but were hidden from view. "Deliriously happy," she assured him as his arms encircled her waist, "though it still seems a bit like a dream. If someone had told me 6 months ago that I would be here now as my wife," he murmured, nuzzling the sensitive spot just below her ear. "As your wife," she agreed, her breath catching at the sensation. "Mother to 5 wonderful children, mistress of a prosperous ranch." "I would have thought them mad." Yorke drew back slightly to look at her, his expression serious despite the joy of the day. "You know the ranch isn't always prosperous, don't you? There will be hard years, drought, harsh winters, disease in the herd. I can't promise it will always be easy." Olivia reached up to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "I didn't marry you for an easy life, Yorke Jensen. I married you for a true one. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." The kiss that followed sealed that promise more effectively than any legal document could have done. Their life together unfolded with the changing seasons, each bringing its own joys and challenges. As Yorke had predicted, there were difficult times: a summer of drought that threatened the herd, a winter so bitter it froze the creek solid for months. But there were far more moments of quiet happiness. The children growing strong and confident under their combined care, the ranch flourishing as they worked side by side, the simple pleasure of falling asleep in each other's arms each night. A year after their wedding, Olivia gave birth to a son they named Daniel, a sturdy boy with his father's wheat gold hair and his mother's determined spirit. 2 years later came Catherine, who had Yorke wrapped around her tiny finger from her first breath. The family that had begun in desperation, with a desperate woman stealing food for her hungry children, had grown into something neither Olivia nor Yorke could have imagined. 7 children, bound not by blood alone but by choice and love. A partnership built on mutual respect and deepening devotion. A home filled with laughter, occasional tears, and the constant hum of activity that comes with a large, busy family. On the 5th anniversary of the night Yorke had caught her stealing from his storehouse, Olivia stood on the porch of their home, watching as her husband taught their youngest daughter to ride her new pony. The other children were scattered across the ranch, engaged in various tasks or play. Lily, now 15 and blossoming into a beauty, was gathering eggs. Matthew and James, inseparable despite no blood relation, were mending a fence under Dale's supervision. Sarah and Emma were hanging laundry, their constant chatter carrying on the breeze. Daniel was helping by thoroughly tangling the clean sheets. The rocking J had prospered under their joint stewardship. The cabin where Olivia and her children had first lived now housed Jacob and his new wife, while the main house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family. The herd was healthy, the crops plentiful, and though there would always be challenges ahead, they faced them together. As if sensing her thoughts, Yorke looked up from where he was adjusting Catherine's small hands on the reins. His eyes found Olivia's across the yard, And the smile they shared held the depth of understanding that comes only from years of shared purpose and unwavering love. Later that night, with the children finally asleep and the house settled into peaceful quiet, they sat together on the porch swing, Olivia's head resting on Yorke's shoulder as they looked out at the star-filled Montana sky. "You ever think about it?" she asked softly. "That night?" "Often," he admitted, his arm tightening around her. "Especially when you make that cornbread I was planning to have for breakfast the next morning." She laughed, nudging him with her elbow. "Be serious." "I am being serious. It was very good cornbread." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "But yes, I think about it. How close we came to never having this. If I hadn't heard you, if I'd turned you in instead of offering you work, if you'd been too proud to accept." If, Olivia murmured. "But none of that happened." What did happen was that a desperate mother met a lonely father, and together they built something beautiful. Yorke was silent for a moment, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her arm. Then he said quietly, "When I saw you that night, standing there with nothing but determination to feed your children, I knew." "Knew what?" she asked, tilting her head to look at him. "That my children needed someone like you," he said simply. Someone brave enough to risk everything for those she loved. Someone strong enough to build a life from nothing but will and work. Someone whose heart was big enough to love children not her own as fiercely as those she bore. Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes, even as she smiled. "And I needed someone like you. Someone who saw value in me when I felt worthless. Someone who offered partnership instead of charity. Someone who taught me to trust again." The swing creaked gently as they rocked, the rhythm as familiar as their heartbeats. Around them, the ranch slept peacefully, cattle in the pastures, horses in the barn, children in their beds. All was as it should be. "I love you, Yorke Jensen," Olivia said softly into the night. "And I love you, Olivia Jensen," he replied, his voice a rumble she could feel against her cheek. "Every day more than the last." As stars wheeled overhead and the Montana wind whispered through the cottonwoods, they sat together, bound by a love that had begun with a desperate act and grown into something as vast and enduring as the land itself. A love that had given two broken families a second chance. A love that promised to sustain them through whatever the future might hold. A love that had started with a gunshot in the night and a simple truth. "My children need someone like you."